Will Carmelo Hayes be the new number one contender and become the U.S. champion? All of that and a whole lot more as we look at this week in Black Wrestling. This is Wrestle Extra.
Yo, this is a Wrestle Extra. I'm your boy A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate, usually joined by my trios team, but today, unfortunately, Mex can't be with us, but I still have, of course, the main man, that is the omnipresent man. Say his name, he will appear. Even on his birthday, he appears.
This is commitment, folks, right here. This is commitment. Absolutely.
The birthday boy that is Gerard Bonner. First of all, sir, of course, happy birthday. Amazing that you're here with us. How are you feeling today? How does it feel to be another year wiser?
You know what's so interesting? I've been, when it comes to either end of the year or my birthday, I'm always very reflective. It's just kind of one of those times you get to look back and see, hey, what went well, what didn't go well, all of the things. And I thought this last year, while it had its challenges, I've had some of the most amazing experiences in this last year, which is just incredible. Working with two new promotions for me, being All Caribbean and Ashe, and both of them have been so good to me. I mean, literally, I just got back from the Bahamas last week, my fourth international trip in the last year.
Wow.
Thanks to All Caribbean Wrestling. Like, that's unbelievable. So between that and all that's been happening with Ashe, and we'll talk about Ashe 6, I am so grateful, man. I am so grateful, and I'm really excited about what this year's gonna hold. So yeah, I'm feeling good. A lot of people have been so kind today. Like, it's almost overwhelming. It's almost overwhelming.
Of course. It's the day that we get to celebrate you, appreciate you for all that you do and what you get up to and all the rest of it. So it makes sense that the kindness and all the good messages are coming through, of course. Let's get things kicked off. You talked at the top of the show about Carmelo Hayes. Of course, Carmelo and Andrade have been having this back and forth, and we got to what they called Game 7.
Yes,
of their rivalry. Of course, both men having 3 wins each against each other. This one was supposed to be the decider, but it had the United States champion, of course, LA Knight, as the guest referee, which kind of just went left. He took out both guys. Of course, the SmackDown GM, Nick Aldis, was not happy with him and then made a triple threat match between himself, Andrade, and Carmelo at Crown Jewel. How do you see this one playing out when they get to Saudi Arabia?
Well, I'd obviously love to see Carmelo Hayes leave as the U.S. champion. I mean, I think it's only right. And I think here's what's interesting. I don't know if LA Knight is really supposed to be a good guy, or if he's trying to give us, again, kind of the Stone Cold Steve Austin space, because what he did Friday night was not anything that a good guy would do at all. I mean, he ruined a 7-game series, 7 matches that we have all loved. We wanted to see a definitive winner, and we didn't get that. So I personally think it's time for LA Knight to lose the championship. And I'd be happy if Carmelo Hayes was able to win it. Honestly, I wouldn't be mad if Andrade won either, but Andrade already has the speed title. I think Carmelo deserves this moment. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
It's interesting because do you think that we'll get any type of real Game 7 between these two guys, or was this always the plan to kind of give us a triple threat match without having a Game 7, without having an actual decider? Do you think it ruins the whole series between Andrade and Carmelo?
I felt like it did. I mean, I want to see who would win the series. They got us, and they took 6 matches and got us invested. And I mean, they were great matches from match 1. Think about this. This goes all the way back to Money in the Bank this year. So we're talking about something we've been invested in since July.
Wow.
And we've paid attention to all of these matches. They were can't miss matches. They all happened on SmackDown. So to me, I think it's kind of unfortunate that we didn't get a definitive winner. And I don't know if we'll ever get that match 7. I guess it depends on who wins this. You know, if one of them wins the U.S. title, then I could see a game 7 happening there for the U.S. championship. If LA Knight walks away with it, I don't know. I feel like they both need to somehow get payback on LA Knight for him ruining their moment.
And that's my thing as well. It's like, you know, if LA Knight gets the win, it would almost feel pointless to get any type of game 7, because we know full well that, you know, where both Andrade and Carmelo are positioned on the card, it was always going to be whoever comes out on top is going to be number 1 contender for the United States Championship.
Right.
And we knew that. What happened in between with kind of getting an opportunity, it was a nice little you know, diversion in terms of all of this, but we still got back to having this game 7. But yeah, so I think that the outcome has to be either Andrade or Carmelo winning in order for us to have a game 7, which then has higher stakes.
Right.
How that then goes is something else, though, because if Carmelo wins at Crown Jewel, does he then lose to Andrade in, you know, when they have their match, or you know, even the other way around? Like, it would then feel like it's a hot potato type of situation, of course, and then you've only got these 3 guys who are going after this championship, and how long will that carry on for? It's a bit of a mind fog in that sense, and not knowing which way it's supposed to go. What, you know, does the outcome help anyone in the long run? And I don't know if it does. But at the same time, I almost think it would be too early for LA Knight to lose his championship. But then it ruins this whole thing with Carmelo and Andrade.
Yeah,
so it's very difficult.
It is difficult. I do think, though, at the end of the day, as long as it's not on Logan Paul, we're okay. we're okay. We're okay. We're okay. Yeah.
I think the better outcome definitely would have been a decider, you know, LA Knight not even being involved in that whole game 7. I don't like there's a way to make sense of him being involved in it, but I don't think he needed to be involved in it at all.
Right.
We get a definitive winner, and then it kind of ups the stakes when it comes to whoever was the number 1 contender, and then the match, one-on-one match with LA Knight. But where we are now, I just don't know. It's a weird one. It's going to be interesting. I'm glad they're, you know, at Crown Jewel, and it's going to have, you know, such a big audience and a big event. But yeah, I'm just conscious of what the outcome is, and then does, you know, moving forward. Yeah, it's going to be a crazy one. But keeping things with Crown Jewel, we also know that the Meta Girls, Shakira Jackson and Lash Legend, will also be at Crown Jewel in a tag team fatal 4-way match for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. Just tell us how that came about and how you feel about those girls making that trip, because we've talked about in the last couple of weeks just what they've done on SmackDown, on Raw, and just how good it feels to see them doing it, kind of fitting in. Now they're at a PLE that, yes, it might not be one of the big 4, but at the same time, the Saudi Arabia event is always a big deal. So how does it feel to see those 2 ladies who are still part of the NXT roster going to Saudi?
You know, it's a huge statement in terms of what WWE thinks of them, particularly any woman that's going over to Saudi Arabia. The WWE thinks a lot of them because those women, not only do they have to perform well, but they have to perform in different attire than what they normally perform in, you know, and they have to be able to be proven to be very respectful of that culture. So to my knowledge, this is the first time that an NXT crew found their way over to Saudi Arabia. So that speaks volumes for what the WWE thinks about the Meta Girls. Like, that is That's amazing. And to see how far they have come
Mm,
from when they first started. I mean, we remember the conversations about Lash Legend during the 2.0 era. And, it just didn't look like things were going to be good for her. But she weathered the storm. She kept training. She did what she needed to do. Her and Jakara found great chemistry.
mm,
And now they're in there. I mean, think about the teams they're in there with. They're in there obviously against a group of former tag team champions,
mm-hmm,
be it
mm-hmm.
Damage Control, Piper and Chelsea, or the current tag team champions, Bianca and Jade. And to me, what's exciting is again to see them get this rub, but then to see this much melanin on our
Mm,
television screens.
mm,
Like again,
mm.
remember at one point it was Jade and Bianca in two separate companies.
Right,
Now they're on
right,
the same team, and we have another team of Black women who are worthy contenders. So it says that what was being done by putting Jade and Bianca together, and I know a lot of people thought it's to hide Jade and all this other stuff, but it's done multiple things. And
mm-hmm.
one of the things it's finally done, I think, is really added some credibility to the women's tag team division and the women's tag team championships, to where now, there was a time where you didn't have three legitimate tag teams
Right,
that you could
right,
put up against the tag team champions. Now you have three from different brands.
right.
That's the crazy part. You got Raw represented, SmackDown represented, and NXT represented with all three of these teams. That says an awful lot about what the women's tag team division is doing. So kudos to Jade and Bianca, and kudos to the Meta Girls for being so good that while they have not been officially announced as part of SmackDown or Raw, they're on
Mm-hmm.
the PLE.
For sure. And here's the thing: when the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships kind of came about, when Sasha Banks and Bailey won it, it was
Mm-hmm.
always supposed to be about whoever had those championships going to different brands. We
Right.
saw Sasha and Bailey do that, but
Mm-hmm.
then it kind of stopped happening. They brought in NXT, had their own women's tag team championships for a while.
Right.
Those then disappeared, and we were still for a while still in this space of, right, what's the point in this title and whatnot. I think
Right.
since Jade and Bianca have held it, it's come back to where it's needed to be. And we've said this before on this show. Even when they lost it, I think there was a purpose in them losing it in order to then
Yes.
build up other tag teams.
Yes.
Like the Unholy Union,
Mm-hmm.
like Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark,
Yes.
and all of those. And here's the crazy thing: you mentioned that at one point we couldn't even name 3 other teams. Now we can name another 3 other teams, probably even more, that could replace any of those 3 teams that are in this
Facts.
match easily.
Absolutely.
As I said,
Absolutely.
Unholy Union, who had the championships,
Mm-hmm.
Shayna and Zoe,
Yep.
even still,
Well, you got a few.
Canzaro
I was gonna
and
say
Carter.
Casey and Car. Yep. Yep. You've
You've
got
got
Fatal
those.
Influence over in
Right.
NXT. I mean, like we've got teams right now.
Yeah,
We've got
yeah,
teams.
of course. And here's the other thing as well. In relation to Lash and Jakara, you could have easily have thought it would have been Fatal Influence in that space.
Yes. Yes.
But WWE decided, for their reasons, for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason that is, but obviously in a very good way, that Lash and Jakara were good enough and deserved to be in that space. And as we've said already, like they've held their own in that space. They've done everything they've needed to do on the 2 shows that they've appeared on. Lash got that big win. They've held their own in the segments and little attacks and whatnot as well over the last couple of weeks. So
Yeah.
it definitely doesn't feel as though in any way, shape, or form that there's any kind of tick box type of scenario where we're
Right.
just like, all right, let's just pick any team from NXT. Let's just throw them in just to say that we've got someone from NXT.
Right.
They fit the bill. And we've talked about it to where we're like, well, it's not just that we're picking them from NXT, but are we looking at it like as though they are ready to be on either SmackDown or Raw?
Right.
So it's phenomenal. And then you add, as you already said, then you add the whole thing of, you know, it being in Saudi and having to represent in a certain way and being respectful of a very different culture and all these kinds of things. And it's crazy. It's crazy to think that these girls, Lash and Jakara, you know, who probably 2 years ago we wouldn't even consider them being in any type of space like this.
Right.
Whereas now they're holding their own. And then going back to, you know, us only having Jade and Bianca, you looked at Lash and Jakara and thought, yeah, they'll be up there in about 3 years or so, and
Right.
maybe they'll lug heads, you know, in a couple of years. But it's happening right now, 2024, and yeah, man, it's great to see, regardless of what the outcome is. I don't think either of us really expect them to come away with the championships, but at the same time, I don't think it matters. It's a very similar situation to, you know, Javon versus Randy Orton.
Randy Orton, yeah.
You're not expecting Javon to win, but at the same, it doesn't actually matter. The simple fact that it's happening is the win, especially for that person. So it's gonna be crazy.
I also am thinking, and I'm just trying to go through my brain on the whole crown jewel thing. It feels like this is the most amount of females on a crown jewel card ever.
I believe so.
Because you have 8 in this match, and then you have the women's title match for the crown jewel championship. That's 10 women.
Right.
I remember when they were just having their first ever, you know, women's match there, and how exciting that was. This is a special time. And again, of the 10 women that are going, 4 of them to be African American.
Phenomenal.
Amazing.
Phenomenal. It's phenomenal stuff, man. It's good to see. We speak of, you know, Lash and Jakara, you know, of course, NXT coming through the NIL program, coming through the ranks, being trained in the way that they have, and very specific, very specialized. But something that we found out today. Oh, this is exciting. This is very exciting. This is very exciting, and I'm sure it'll be even more exciting for yourself. Very closely connected to all of this as well, in a way. Is WWE have announced that they are have started this whole WWE ID, the ID standing for Independent Development. They've announced that they're going to, you know, put things in place to help out certain independent promotions or promotions and wrestling schools. You know, and there's a few that they've named already. You've got Booker T's Reality of Wrestling.
Yes.
Seth Rollins is Black and Brave in Iowa. Elite Pro Wrestling in New Hampshire. Knox Pro, where Rikishi is also one of the trainers as well. They're based in LA. And of course, I say about you being connected in a way is also Cody Rhodes's Nightmare Factory, based in your hometown of Atlanta. How does it feel for you to hear this type of thing? Not just because of what it is, but of course, as I said, being so closely connected to all of it. Just tell the people how it feels for yourself.
It's pretty remarkable, actually. It's remarkable to consider that just how quickly things can change. Remember, it was just a couple of years ago where WWE flat out said, we're not looking to the independents anymore. And they created this whole NIL situation, and it gave us 2.0 for NXT and all the things. And here we are coming full circle with now WWE officially acknowledging these schools being out there. And it certainly doesn't hurt that they're being run by people connected to WWE. That only makes sense, you know, but these are also schools that have proven to produce some of the best wrestlers in the game.
Of course.
So nobody can argue with Reality of Wrestling because Booker T is there. Look at all that they're doing. Black and Brave. Nobody can argue the Nightmare Factory, right? Nobody can argue Knox Pro. Nobody can argue with these kinds of things. So I think it's a great, great moment. I think it also speaks to, you know, for the people who've chosen to be participating with these schools, that they don't necessarily have to then just go to Orlando per se, but you know, it's almost like going to college, right? Where you have certain things that work within that particular program, where either you go to that school or you go to, say, a community college and you can transfer the credits. This is
Right.
a similar kind of thing
Right.
to
Right.
me. And
Right.
I think this is so amazing for those who don't know. I'm connected to the Nightmare Factory. I do commentary for their student showcases, and the student showcases are kind of the graduation of these
Mm-hmm.
students who go through these 12-week courses. And they have their first match, and I get the privilege of calling that. So again, it's another neat connection to the WWE, and it's just like, holy cow. And so for the Nightmare Factory, who, you've got Cody, you've got
Mm-hmm.
QT Marshall,
Mm-hmm.
it's always been a pipeline to AEW.
Yep.
But now it's a definitive pipeline based on WWE's own account to
Right.
WWE as well. So it makes these schools must see and must attend kind of schools, because if your goal is to get to the WWE and maybe you can't directly get a tryout and go to Orlando, you
Mm-hmm.
can go to these schools and know that there's a pipeline to
Mm-hmm.
get there. And who wouldn't want to go to a school where the owner is the WWE champion, right? Like, who wouldn't want to do that?
Like the
So
yeah.
I just, to find this out on my birthday, like, what? I mean,
Of
like, this
course.
is amazing.
Of course.
Amazing.
It's
Amazing.
it's crazy. Like, so that they've talked about, sending specialized help, whether that be, equipment, whether that be funding, trainers. I'm sure they'll probably send superstars to do like seminars and stuff like that.
Sure.
They'll also kind of, I believe from what I've read, it seems as though they'll be, almost scouting and picking certain wrestlers or trainees to further develop and watch them and help them in whatever way they can. So to think that, especially with reality wrestling, for example, we've seen the likes of Athena. Athena's come through
Mhm.
reality wrestling.
Right.
There's been one or two others. There was someone else in my head, and I've completely forgotten who it is. Oh, Roxanne Perez, of course.
Yes.
Um, both former NXT Women's Champions.
Yes.
One is now the longest reigning Ring of Honor champion of all time.
Right. The
You
other is one
then
of the top 10 wrestlers in the world.
exactly, literally.
Yeah.
And then to think that you've got the likes of Promise Braxton,
Right.
the Kentish Bros,
Mhm.
all of these other, but all these other people as well that are currently there, who now see this type of news. Just to imagine what even they would think,
Mhm.
and the opportunities that they will have, possible opportunities they have in coming through. It's exciting to think that, even with the Nightmare Factory, with Sean Dean and
Yeah. Carly
um,
Bravo.
Carly
Mhm.
Bravo,
Yes.
them being involved in that as well.
Mhm.
To think that these guys, we could possibly see them or someone from any of these schools show
Yeah.
up on NXT.
Easily.
It's that part for me that's exciting.
Yeah.
It's definitely that part for me that's exciting with all of this. Just to flip it a little bit, we've seen NXT UK, for example.
Mhm.
We saw that all come about. WWE were closely involved with Progress Wrestling,
Yeah.
IWC, which is based in Scotland.
Mhm.
They had all this stuff kind of in the UK. Obviously, all that's broken down. We
Yeah.
expected NXT Europe.
Mhm.
Hasn't happened yet. Do
Yeah.
you see any way that this ID thing could have a negative effect in any way?
Hmm. Um, Interesting. From the outset, I don't see it being a negative. I think if anything, it, for one, may drive some people to want to attend these schools.
Right.
I do think, though, for those who are attending the schools, they have to understand that just because you are a part of the school doesn't give you automatic entry
Not at
into
all.
the like, you still have, and I think that's one of the things that I can confidently say is,
Mhm.
the students who go through, they go through those classes, they have those matches, and then some of them choose to continue wrestling and they start getting booked on other shows in the area or back, in their home state or whatever. And some don't look to pursue. I think, people have to consider that, yes, being at these schools will get you one moment closer to the WWE if that is your goal, or AEW if that is your goal, but you're still going to have to do the work. So I think, for some who just think that, okay, well, guilt by association, I'm automatically in. No, you'll have to do the work, and it's probably going to be more work because for whatever, Booker might, because think about this, Booker T, they run quite a bit at Reality of Wrestling, but not all of the Reality of Wrestling people show up at NXT, So if you just look at the percentage of people who have shown up in those places, it's not the largest percentage. So that just means that you have to really be a standout. Carly Bravo stood out to AEW. I remember watching his first match going, that guy's a star. I told him that night, you're a star. And so to see him be like one of the first of that crew to really make it, didn't surprise me at all. There were a lot of people in that class and in future classes who have gotten opportunities in AEW. They were working on Dark or things of that nature, but they did not get to move into the stratosphere or move into something where they're on weekly television like a Carly Bravo. So I think that's the thing that those who are students will need to understand, that you're still going to have to be exceptional, because what gets you, so graduating from these schools is one thing. Those schools have a lot of pipelines that you can get to.
Of course.
It can get you on indie shows. It can get you on TNA. It can get you on MLW and those spaces. But you have to understand, WWE is still top of the line. And there's going to have to be a different level of being a standout that you're going to need to do that. It's not just going to be, well, I was a student at Nightmare Factory, sign me up, WWE. I'm certain it's not going to work that way.
Right. And I think as well, going back to your metaphor of college, people will go to colleges and different things. Doesn't matter what they're doing, whether it's a scholarship in a sport or whether they're, studying as studying law or something like that. You may do all of those things and graduate and do well in the college and blah, blah, blah. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you then do, or the opportunity comes for you for the rest of your life.
Correct.
I mean, and we've seen, in so many colleges, I'm sure it happens in the US as well as over here in the UK, that people study certain things but they never end up doing that for the, as their job or career or whatever else. So like you said, it's not a meal ticket. But I think that's going to be the difficult part for some people, because I'm sure that anyone in Reality of Wrestling, anyone that goes to Black and Brave, anyone that goes to the Nightmare Factory, they're thinking in their minds, all right, these guys are connected to whether it be AEW, WWE. We've seen people come from those schools and go to those two places. That's going to happen for me. But as you said, the work still has to be put in. And we've seen even with the NIL program, the amount of people that they take on year to year, how many of them do we actually see come through? In the WWE, well, even in NXT, first of all, it's not a lot, but at the same time, it's still we celebrate it so often on here. We see how good it has been for those people who do come through. Jakara, Lash, Jada Parker. So many others, almost everyone that's in NXT right now, has come through the NIL system. So, it works out, but there are still so many that don't make it. Even one that you saw just last week, Kalia Capri was once part of the NIL. Didn't quite make it to the next stage, I guess, but still has still found a way to make it herself through All Caribbean Wrestling, the new All Caribbean Wrestling Women's Champion, of course. Shout that out as well. So there are still avenues for people to go through, and it might be the long game. She may end up in one of the big promotions soon enough, maybe, but she just has to take a different route. So while this is all very exciting, and kind of makes it a little bit more official that
Yes.
WWE are connected to these independent promotions and training schools, there still has to be work put in by anyone involved and everyone that's involved in order to see them get through. But with all of these different places and all the different stars and wrestlers that are there, is there anyone for you that you can see making that jump, or that you want to see, should I say, making that jump? Any of the current stars or any of the current trainees in any of these promotions that have been connected now to WWE?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Mm,
I would love to see a Promise Braxton make her way to NXT. I mean, her
top of my list as
style,
well. Top of my
yeah,
list as
her
well. Definitely.
style is one, and we had a chance to see her at Ashe a couple of months ago, and she
Mm,
just has this style that is just like, sheesh, that no nonsense
yeah. Yeah.
striker, I'm gonna take you out kind of thing, which I think is amazing. And again, the diversity in presentation of African American wrestlers, we don't have a Promise Braxton in NXT or
True.
WWE right now. So
True. True.
I think
True.
she would really, really, I think, fare well. And especially,
Mm.
if you can make it in that NXT women's division, you're gonna be all right because it is stacked. I think she'd be a great addition.
Oh man, just to think to see a Promise Braxton amongst all of those ladies in that women's division right now. I mean, I just kind of caught up with everything today and watched
Oh yeah.
Halloween Havoc, and just to see the amount of women that had so much TV time and did what
Yes.
they did, and you've got you've got new arrivals, you've got
Mhm.
international stars, you've got girls that have been come up through the Neil program and doing their thing and all this kind of stuff. And to think that you could still fit a Promise Braxton in that scenario,
Right.
wow,
That's insane. That's
wow.
absolutely insane.
That's going to be very, very, very interesting. Speaking of Halloween Havoc, let's do a quick recap of what we
Uh-huh.
did see. Um, you know, we saw Obafemi
Mhm.
try to win back his North American Championship against Tony D'Angelo in a tables, ladders, and scares match. Talk us through that match and what you expect next for Obafemi.
Well, it was another really solid match. I think Tony D had more confidence in this one than he did
For
in the
sure.
previous match. And so, that made for something that was very competitive. Obafemi is still Obafemi. And I
Mm.
think it should be very clear that it took the entire family to come
Mhm.
out,
Mhm.
distract him, and cost him that match.
Mhm.
So congratulations to Tony D. With that said, Obafemi, it's rumored that he said his goodbyes to NXT at the end of Halloween
Interesting.
Havoc. And if
Interesting.
that is indeed the case, if he's headed to the main roster, like, make it happen,
Mm.
because he has done personally, I know it's not been quite a year for him, or at least if we are coming up on a year
Mhm.
in terms of him being in the business, but he is I think there's some people who take this business like fish to water, and he's got it. I mean, from
Mhm.
his entrance to his promos to his presence, he
Mhm.
is one of one, and he
Mhm.
could go into Raw or SmackDown and wreak havoc right now. So I think he's done what there is for him to do in NXT. I think if he goes after the NXT championship right now, as much as I'd like to see him as NXT champion, um, I think his star actually rose significantly as a North American champion.
Mhm.
So let him go and let him cook on Raw
True.
or SmackDown. I mean, I think it would be amazing for him.
Just as you question though, the space where he fits in if he was to go for the NXT championship.
Mhm.
And we know he's got it all. everything ticks every box. But in what space does he fit in if he goes to the main roster, whether it be Raw or SmackDown? Where does he fit in the current climate? Is it just straight in for one of the mid card titles, or does he go in with a feud with someone significant? Like, how does Obafemi actually fit in to the main roster if it was to happen within the next couple of weeks?
It's interesting because while there have been a lot of battles between monsters on Raw,
Mm.
SmackDown doesn't have a monster.
Ah,
So
true,
I think it would be
true.
interesting to see him head over to SmackDown and create some real problems over there. He could create some problems for whoever ends up being the US champion. He
Yeah.
could create some real problems. Well, I mean, whether it's LA Knight or
Hmm.
Carmelo Hayes or Andrade, he can create some real problems, I think, for them. Seeing that was a North American champion, it only makes sense that he would
Hmm.
go after, the US championship. But yeah, I think him on SmackDown would be a major, major move. Raw, I think Raw could be cool for him. If you're looking for somebody else to battle with Bronson Reed,
Hmm.
or something like that. But I think having a monster over on SmackDown would be a good move.
I think that makes a lot of sense. But it's interesting also to see that Bron Breakker has kind of made a bit of a statement and saying, "I'm ready for anyone."
Mm-hmm. You
Um,
imagine
that
that.
that could be a nice surprise. That could be a very nice
Woo.
surprise. That would be a very, very nice surprise.
Yes.
But again, I feel as though if it were to happen, Bron would kind of have to go over only because Bron needs to hold that championship for a little bit longer than he did the first time.
Well, it just depends on when they would put Oba in that space.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
true.
think,
True, true, true.
if you give Oba some time, let him cook, let him show
Mm,
how dominant he is. Because here's the other thing I thought about, and I hate mentioning this name, but again, monsters come and go.
hmm.
And the last monster that might have resembled Oba was another guy with an O. That's Odyssey Jones. And that kind of came and went. So I think, again, he could fit in either of those spaces since they
Hmm.
had space for another monster. So if he
True.
goes on to Raw, he could just carve out a path of destruction that could lead him to Braun Breaker. Similar thing on SmackDown as well, which could lead him to the US Championship.
For sure, for sure. When you mention a monster with the name O, I've always going to say Omos.
Ah, well, there's another one. What is it with
Three
all these
O's
guys by the name of O who are monsters
and black.
and black? Go
Wow.
figure.
Oh, someone has to talk
Wow.
to someone somewhere.
Right.
Jeez.
Good grief. Oh man.
Also at Halloween Havoc, we saw the unfortunate ending to what was the gauntlet match
Hmm.
with Kalani Jordan defending her women's North American Championship. Unfortunately, losing it to Fallon Henley. Of course, that's had to go against all three of Fatal Attraction. Is that right?
Fatal
Yeah,
influence. Fatal
Fatal
influence.
Influence.
Yes.
Yeah, all three of them. Of course, all three of them then got involved. Ended up, having an influence on a fatal influence
Hmm.
on the match. Fallon Henley is now the new Women's North American Champion. What does this mean for Kalani? What does the result and how it happened mean? Again, what does Kalani do next? Where do we go with her?
I think now is where we get to see Kalani chase.
Mm,
I definitely, there's a story between Kalani and Fallon. They were friends, they were a
yep.
tag team, all of those things. Now there are some stakes to it.
Right.
Those stakes being the women's North American champion. Add to that Fallon now has this group that can back her up.
Yep.
And Kalani still doesn't really have that dependable group of friends. She's had people
True.
come and go. So I think this is now the chase for Kalani to just kind of see what she's made of. And because think about it, we never really saw her chase the championship because it was an inaugural title.
Hmm.
So, it was qualifying to get into the ladder match, which happened
Hmm.
earlier this year. So this, I think, will be interesting, and we'll get to see what Kalani is made of and what she really brings to the table if she is now chasing the North American Championship.
It should be very interesting. I mean, she had a great showing
Yes.
against all three ladies. It was nice to see that, it had to take all three of them to get involved in order for, Kalani to lose the championship.
Yeah.
I think we definitely will see Kalani and Fallon bump heads again. Whether
Mhm.
she wins it again is another thing. Whether the title change hands before she wins it again, I do feel as though she will win it again.
Hmm.
I think there's just a space for her to be kind of like the figurehead of this section of the
Yeah.
division.
Yeah.
Um, I think there are too many, we've seen there are too many ladies who are kind of involved in the NXT Women's Championship. And even with the new arrival of I forget how to say her name. Is it
Oh,
Zaria?
Zaria. Zaria.
That's the one.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, she was involved and
Mhm.
attacked Fallon and the rest of the ladies as well. So we've got that. This women's division is just great. It's just
It's
crazy.
unbelievable. It's
It's
unbelievable.
just crazy because we still have Jada Parker and Lola
Yes.
Vice doing their
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
Wendy Chu and
Mhm.
I forget her name again.
Rosemary?
No, the other crazy
Oh, Tatum Paxley. Tatum
Tatum
Paxley.
Paxley as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Even add Rosemary because of what happened
True.
on Bound for Glory as well.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So Ruka's still about.
Yes.
This women's division is just
It's
stupid.
unbelievable. It's
It's.
they could literally do a whole show with the women's division and still not get all of the women on there.
I was thinking literally the same thing. I'm thinking to myself, do we now need to have another women's PLE? Like, do we need that to happen? Because I feel as though there is space for it without it having to be necessarily a statement, but more a celebration. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whereas the original one was a statement that
Mhm.
was then never followed up because whoever in WWE at the time felt it was a one time thing.
Mm.
With this NXT women's division at the moment, and even with all the ladies on the main roster, I think there's a space for something like that to happen, and it definitely be a yearly thing.
Yes.
Um, but going back to Kalani, yeah, I think it's definitely the chase that we're going to get. But it's going to be interesting to see as well now what happens with Jada Parker and Lola, and then what happens with the eventual winner of that match,
Right.
because that must add stakes in some way and obviously push you up in the ranks in a sense. So yeah, this women's division is just crazy,
It
absolutely
is.
crazy.
It is.
To move away from that real quick and talk about the main event, Trick Williams, of course, got the win and retained his NXT championship over Ethan Page in what was it?
Devil's Playground, yeah.
Devil's Playground. All of these
Uh-huh.
names of these matches, I'm just like, there's this, there's that.
Uh-huh.
Devil's Playground. We saw at the end, obviously, like I said, he won. Rich Holland gets involved.
Mhm.
I think that's great for him. I'm so glad he actually
Yeah.
won that match against
Andre Chase.
Andre Chase.
Yeah.
But then, what a setup! Um, Bubba Ray gets involved to
Mhm.
makes the save for Trick as well, who was being double teamed by Page and Ridge as well. Of course, we already know that NXT is going to Philadelphia to, of course, the ECW arena.
Mhm.
I'm sure now we're going to get a tag team match with Trick and Bubba Ray against Ethan Page and Ridge Holland. What does that do? Because we've seen Trick, with Joe Hendry.
Mhm.
Trick's always seems to find himself in these places that's always about, eyes on the product, eyes on the product. What does this do for Trick? And do we think that it's going to be Ethan or Ridge who then comes after Trick following whatever happens with this?
Well, I definitely think Trick finds himself in these situations because he is the face of NXT, and it's
Mm,
clear that they are building NXT around Trick Williams,
right.
and so he takes to that significantly. I hope I don't forget this, so I'm going to write it down.
Hmm.
There, okay. So I think that's interesting for Trick. Obviously, if this leads to NXT 2300 in Philly next Wednesday, I think it's a brilliant move You know, we were wondering how they're going to incorporate ECW, because here's what's wild. All of the companies that have done things in the 2300 arena could never really refer to it as the ECW arena because they didn't
Right.
own the rights to that.
Okay.
And they could
Okay.
not, then incorporate ECW. They could call it extreme, they could call it hardcore. But for WWE to do that, because they own ECW, they can call it the ECW arena. They can bring in the old ECW heads. And so I think, I think we'll see Bubba Ray. I wouldn't be surprised to see RVD show up that night, or whoever. Well, they did announce, who was it? Yeah, it is Lola versus Jada Parker at the 2300 arena with Dawn Marie as the referee. So they're going to incorporate as many of the ECW originals as they can in that, which I think is amazing. So shout out. And again, what a time to lead the NXT brand. NXT has never had this kind of crossover with ECW before. Never, ever have they gone to Philly in this way. So this is a really, really big deal. Now, what I wrote down that I didn't want to forget, because leading into Halloween Havoc, there were a bunch of diss tracks that were happening involving Ethan Page and Trick Williams. And then, well, Ethan had I thought a really solid track.
Decent.
Like,
it was decent.
I mean, it was solid. I was just so blown away Saturday night when I'm coming back from Charlotte, and I check out this diss track from Trick Williams that is a whole take on Kirk Franklin's Revolution. And I'm like, what are we doing? I mean, you have Devon in there.
Yes.
They're in a church. He called himself the Anointed One. I'm just like, what is happening right now? It's a wild time to be in pro wrestling when Kirk Franklin's Revolution is the bass track for a diss track from the NXT champion.
That is so crazy.
It's crazy.
That is so crazy. I didn't even notice that myself. I didn't even clock that at all. That's just madness. And here's the other thing about this whole ECW thing as well, is that obviously, we've seen NXT in collaboration with TNA. TNA still has a good few, the likes of a Tommy Dreamer, Rhino, who was just inducted into Mex. I don't disagree, but it's kind of working, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's working.
So. Of course, we saw Rhino, who was inducted into the TNA Hall of Fame as well.
Yeah.
Even one or two of those guys could turn up as well at this show. So that should be very, very interesting. Mentioning that also leads me into the next thing that we want to talk about, but slightly unfortunate circumstances. Following Bound for Glory over the weekend, as they would usually do, TNA would then usually the next day film for the next few weeks, or do TV tapings and stuff.
Right.
We heard the unfortunate news that Chris Bay was injured, very serious injury, a neck injury as well. Was stretched out of the building. I believe it was said that the match was stopped and the show itself was stopped as well because of how serious the injury was. We found out that he's had emergency neck surgery the following day, or the same day. Is up and well, resting up in hospital and stuff like that. But there's not been any kind of more news on how serious this injury actually is, and I believe they're trying to kind of keep it under wraps for a while until they probably have very specific details and stuff like that. Neck surgeries are always very serious, as we know, as we've seen in pro wrestling in the past. How worried or how worrying is a neck surgery when it comes to pro wrestling?
It's very worrying. I think it was Triple H who was talking to Randy Orton Friday night, and he was referencing that Randy Orton's last injury wasn't just like a torn ACL or a torn shoulder. It was a back issue. Issues with your neck and your back are just huge in the space of pro wrestling, because so much trauma happens to your neck, and if you can't turn, the thing about this, if if your ACL is torn or what have you, it can heal. And if you break your leg, which nobody wants you to break your leg, you can still live a quality life. If you break your neck and have neck injuries, the quality of life for you can be significantly changed.
Very different.
And so TNA is not known for these kinds of injuries. And it's wild to me that they had 2 injuries
Yep.
happen at those TV tapings, Vikingo being the other one. And I saw video for that, and that was just not good. And so I think one of the things that we're probably going to have to get to, and I it's wild to talk about, is perhaps we need to start looking at safer ways to present pro wrestling. I think if you go back to the Attitude Era, one of the real challenges was the envelope kept getting pushed further and further and further and further. And then you get, Hell in a Cell 98 with Mankind and The Undertaker, where it's not enough to have a giant cage. It's not enough to have somebody fall off of the side of the cage. So let's start the match at the top of the cage and throw somebody off the top of the cage. Right? Like, it's levels of violence that you just keep pushing the envelope to where it's become incredibly dangerous. And you don't want it to become too dangerous. And I say that to say, both Vikingo and Chris Bay have, these death-defying kinds of moves. Vikingo, it is a marvel to me that Vikingo hasn't been injured earlier, given all of the things that he does and the level of precision that it takes to, do 700 flips and still somehow land on your feet.
Right.
So it does make me wonder if they need to, much like Ospreay had to do, find a safer style of presenting pro wrestling where you can still be effective, but not put yourself in as much danger.
We've seen, Big E still out injured based on neck injury. We saw the likes of Bryan Danielson, Edge, Kurt Angle, Saraya, Stone Cold Steve Austin, so many of us who have had neck injuries and were out of the game for a while, a very long time. I expect it to be a long time that Chris Bay is out. I'm sure that's something that we can't kind of pretend it's not going to be. It's a neck injury. It's going to be a while, but I hope it's not too long, and I hope it definitely isn't a situation where he has to stop wrestling altogether. Let's just hope for that part to be not the thing. To move on, we've got still a couple of more things to get through. Very, very little time. The big news last week was Samantha Irvin leaving the WWE very abruptly. People didn't know why, didn't know how, making up all sorts of rumors and blah, blah, blah. But then we found out from her herself as to a reason or a factor involved in why she left. One of them being shocking to hear, but when you stop and think, okay, shocking to hear, she didn't even like announcing. When you first read that, what did you think, and how do you think now?
When I first read that, it said to me how amazing she is, because most people go to a job that they don't like and they just, put in their 8 hours, clock in, they get there in just enough time not to be late. They leave early enough not to be considered cheating time. They'll take an extra 5 minutes on their break or lunch because they don't like their job. Instead of saying, I'm going to excel with the hand that I've been dealt. And so for her to have only been in the WWE for 3 years and to have become the biggest thing in ring announcing in the last 2 decades, to have someone like Michael Buffer, the greatest announcer of all time, be a public fan of yours, for Lillian Garcia to publicly be a fan of yours for something you didn't like to do, it makes me wonder how. Think about this. This woman announced 2 days of WrestleMania, the biggest WrestleMania of all time. Mike Rome didn't even get a spot on there. She did. And she didn't like it. So what makes me wonder, what happens when she does something she likes?
And for me, that's what it is as well. First reaction is, what? You didn't like it? And I've seen the reactions of others, on social media, and how can you talk about not liking it when WWE did this for you and did that for you and blah, blah. But like you said, that whole thing about work, people need to understand and remember that entertainment is also a job.
It is a job.
And yes, most of the people who end up in entertainment, or the perception is, should I say, most people that end up in entertainment have been pursuing this thing for their whole life. So once they're in it, they're going to make the most of it. It's the best thing in the world. It's the best thing ever. They can't think of themselves doing anything else. But there are some people in both sport and entertainment who do it just because they maybe fell into it. Yeah. It was just something that they were good at and not necessarily passionate about. So they just carried on.
Yeah.
As I believe Samantha Irvin found herself in that same space. She was given this opportunity, and it wasn't even the thing that she actually went for.
Right.
The whole thing was her going towards being a professional wrestler. That's what she actually tried out for. Didn't work out. They offered her the announcer job. This woman, as you said, has taken this thing, and she even said, I believe I saw it in a response to a comment on X, saying that as much as she didn't necessarily like it and it wasn't the thing that she wanted to do, she was definitely going to make the most of it.
Yes.
She definitely found a way for her to enjoy it while still doing it. This is why we had the charismatic star that she gave us. I think she mentioned in the same comment about, this is why she sang the promo or sang the introductions in her mind.
Yes.
Didn't necessarily sing as in note for note sing,
right,
but still with the way she pronounced and all those things, the way we had the Chelsea Green and the Ludwig Kaiser and all those things. Was because she was trying to find her way of putting her stamp and also trying to also enjoy it, even though it wasn't something that she was necessarily passionate about. So like you said, it means everything. And it says a lot about her as well, in terms of the type of person that she is. And also the fact that she decided to leave in a time where she was at her pinnacle. Because like any other job, if you don't like it, get out. Some people like to stay there and hold on to it and whatnot, but
and most can't afford to leave.
That's true. That's true.
So
that's true.
Most people, and that's what's amazing to me about the IWC is that, they're just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh my God, I can't believe she'd do this. I can't believe she'd say this. Yet most of them go to jobs every day that they don't like.
Every single day.
Every single day,
Every day.
And they do the best they can because they need the money. And so I think for her to be in the position to say, yeah, I'm at the top of my game, but this is not leading me to where I want to go. Right. I really want to be a manager. I want to be a general manager. If that's not the path that you see for me, let me hop off of this train.
Right.
That says that she's very self-aware. That says that she knows what she wants and that she's willing to go after it. And so I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from her. If there is something that we really want to pursue it. And if there's something that's not working for us and you've given it an amount of time and it's not working, then go and find the thing that will work for you. And
sure.
I think that's admirable.
For sure. I relate to it a lot because it reminds me of my own kind of personal situation. I'm not going to get into it. The show's not about me. But This is why it relates to me very, very much. And I understand exactly how she's thinking and the way she's approached. One, being in the job, and two, kind of making a decision to get out when, the opportunity that she wanted from it just wasn't going to happen. And she knew there was no way of it happening. Before the show's out, I'm going to give you your time to talk about Arshay 6 and all of the things Arshay that we've learned in the last few days.
Arshay 6 was incredible. It took place this past Saturday in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we started finding out who else would qualify for the 8-man tournament to crown the first ever Arshay Wrestling men's champion. And so there were a couple of matches that happened. There was a 13-man battle royal, the Halloween battle royal, that saw Trevor Eon win under some questionable circumstances.
Oh, wow.
but he did win. One of those circumstances saw him actually get eliminated, but the referee missed it. Jordan Holt thought he won. Jordan Holt gets eliminated. Ref never saw. So Trevor Eon wins. But Jordan Holt does get the opportunity to at least compete again in the tournament. So we've learned that. Darius Lockhart and Billy Dixon won their tag team match to be able to advance, which is great. There are still 2 slots that are open, which we will find out who those will belong to in December. But everybody's talking about the unveiling of the Ashe Wrestling Men's Championship. Incredible. Just incredible. What a gore. You know, we're in this era where we're getting all these new championships and everybody's got a new belt design or whatever. This is one of the best looking championships in all of the sport, not just independent of WWE, AEW. Nobody has a belt that looks like the Ashe Wrestling Men's Championship. So you guys will be able to check it out on December the 7th as we crown our first Ashe Wrestling Men's Champion. 8-man tournament happening that night. It's going to be very, very special. We had some great women's action as well. Karen Bam Bam Renee against Jada Stone. We saw the debut of Jordan Blade. She went against Tootie Lynn Ramsey. So all of this is going to be available at AsheWrestling.com, I believe, next week.
Phenomenal stuff, man. I believe we've got through everything.
I think we did.
Is fast spent. This is WrstlXta. You have been watching on the WrestleMania UK YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe and to see us every single week. But also when Mex gets back and puts out all of his things in response to WWE, AEW, everything else in between, you can also find Mex on WrestleMania.uk on Instagram, WrestleMania UK on X. You can also find Mex on Gorilla Position as well, WWE GP on Instagram and on YouTube. Also with the Mandem at WrestlXta on WrestlXta on YouTube as well. Like and subscribe. See their show every single week and all the other content that they put out. You can find this man on his birthday here. How? Why? I don't know. But he is here and I'm grateful. But you can also find him on all things Bonafide, his own show, The Faction Show, on WWT Live as well every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And also doing all of the things, as you mentioned already, Ashe Wrestling, All Caribbean Wrestling, the Nightmare Factory, now officially WWE ID.
Unbelievable.
Oh, interesting. Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, IWE, and of course, Southern Honor Wrestling as well. You can find me, A Dazzle, in the one place you need to see me, which is Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. Guys, thank you for your time. We got through so much in just the hour.
We did.
And we will see you again next time.
That's my job now.
Yeah, today.